to deliver on that promise, and therefore the Queen in Parliament, as part of Parliament, would be entitled to prorogue. Parliament would, of course, come back within a few days. The absence of Parliament would be very, very brief, as normally happens when one session ends and a new session begins. So that's, I think, the constitutional position. But thank you for listening to me twice in one evening. You're clearly a glutton for punishment, but I'm very grateful. We've got lots of texts coming in. So Michael has had to say, Theresa May's deal is risky, leaving with no deal is risky, remaining is risky. Objectively and accurately to assess any of these risks is impossible. All we know for sure is that leave won. So let's get on with it, with good grace and faith in our wonderfully capable country. And Harry has texted, providing the government doesn't take no deal off the table next week, I have a good sense that the people will see straight through the project fear as we did in the referendum, thus rallying support for a no deal as we have been seeing recently, making it more likely to happen. So lots of interesting texts. And Dean in Portsmouth, would you like to come in briefly before we go to the news?
Yes, Jacob. Hello. You're the reason why I got involved in politics. I voted for the first time in a referendum, that I voted for Tory party in 2017. Two questions I've got, if you don't mind. Just quick, brief.
Go away, please.
Right. Chancellor, he voted for us to have a referendum. He voted for us to, he voted on our behalf to trigger Article 50, and he voted for us to have it on 29th of March. What's his problem?
I think you asked the key question, that he's not alone. The majority for the Article 50 Act was huge, and yet now people are saying they didn't realise it had a 2-year end date. Either they weren't paying attention, or they've got very short memories.
And number two, are we allowed as people to take the Parliament to court if they're blocking a referendum? Like legally, to take them to court? Because
no.
They cannot mess us around like that. So is a referendum... It was such a debate about this referendum. It was ridiculous. And the people are saying that
we can't take them to court, but you can always vote for another party. And that's, I think, the risk if politicians don't deliver. But it is now 8:30 precisely, and it's time for the news with Lisa Aziz. Welcome back. We've been overwhelmed with calls. I think lots of people want to point out that I said the Battle of Castellon was 1451, and it was, of course, 1453. So I'm sorry about that mistake, but what we're discussing is should we be listening to these warnings about no-deal Brexit or just putting them down to outright scaremongering? Call in on 0345 6060 973, text 84850, or tweet at LBC. And lots of people seem to have views on this. Our Sovereign, Her Majesty the Queen, has been visiting the Sandringham Women's Institute and said, as we look for new answers in the modern age, I, for one, prefer the tried and tested recipes, like speaking well of each other and respecting different points of view, coming together to seek out the common ground, and never losing sight of the bigger picture. To me, these approaches are timeless, and I recommend them to everyone. And I think those are comments that every loyal British subject can agree with, though I'm not sure that the Chancellor has been doing that, threatening to possibly resign, which may be scaring lots of you and making you sleep less well tonight, as he ramps up his view of Project Fear. I'm not sure that is coming together to seek the common ground. And, of course, the Prime Minister of the Irish Republic isn't bound by what the Queen says, so Mr Varadkar has been talking about customs posts and possibly even the army. So what do you think about all of this? Do you have strong views? Do you think we should all listen to the Queen and seek out the common ground? What is the common ground? Or are you worried that Mr Hammond may be about to resign, leaving the country in the lurch? And we've got a new caller, Steve in Southampton. What's your view?
Good evening, Jacob. Great pleasure to speak with you. I wish Mr Hammond would resign. He doesn't seem to be on our side. What appalls me is the behaviour of many of your fellow MPs who have obviously not listened to the Queen's advice, while they seem to be more concerned about feathering their own nests or actually looking after their own interests because they want to derail the Brexit process. What really appalls me, if the civil service and MPs have started planning correctly from day one for a proper Brexit, then we wouldn't now suddenly be faced with, oh, we won't have medicines, and oh, we won't have this, and oh, we won't have security. But if they'd been doing their job properly from the off and actually preparing for a proper Brexit, then I would have been more assured that these things would be sorted. In any case, you've got people like Rotterdam and Ostend falling over themselves to say, we will look after you. I mean, I think...
And Calais made it clear that Calais is ready.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as far as Mr. Varadkar is concerned, my understanding, a lot of the customs work to do with animal welfare is done not on the border anyway. It's done remotely. And what really, really upsets me, Jacob, is that a lot of the people who are scaremongering, they're playing Russian roulette with our lives. And then, unfortunately, people are getting scared about the fact they won't have their medicine when only about 25% of medicines are brought in from the EU anyway. And so that makes me angry. Instead of focusing on doing the job, they're too busy trying to stop Brexit, thwart Brexit, delay Brexit, or even stay wedded to the European Union. If MPs are so power mad, why are they so wedded to the idea of ceding power to the European Union? You're an MP. Please tell me why they so want to do that.
Completely puzzles me. I don't see the point of being there if you don't exercise the democratic mandate that voters have given you. And I'm really intrigued by what you say on preparing for no deal, because surely that was the Chancellor's responsibility. He was in charge of the purse strings. Yep. So threatening to resign, it can't be anything more than a fit of pique, can it?
Bring it on, because he's never been wedded to the idea. And I think Theresa May was very good at saying, yes, I was a Remainer, but I'm committed to delivering for the British public. Well, I'm afraid her words just do not match her actions, because if she really felt that, why didn't she accept the free trade deal when it was on the table?
Absolutely right. Thank you for calling, Steve, and I hope you will call again. We've had a brilliant text from Shannon, who says that I might think of her as a snowflake, but I think her text is so thoughtful that I don't think she is, because I don't think snowflakes are this thoughtful. She says that she thinks remaining is probably the better option on balance, but I'm 100% against a second vote. If there is no deal, we must leave. Democracy must be respected. Maybe after a few years we can campaign for a vote to get back in, but Remain lost this one. Time to go. Thank you, Shannon. I think that absolutely fits in with what the Queen was asking for, respecting the views of others and respecting that one side in a democracy wins or one side loses. And it's fascinating that those favouring the people's vote, the losers' vote, are now very upset with Jeremy Corbyn for not backing them, for saying he doesn't want to rerun the 2016 referendum. And they've said because the Labour leadership and front bench won't back a people's vote, they've pulled away from tabling a motion in Parliament. So that's very interesting, and I think they're in line with the text I just read out. So now we're going to go to Graham in Glasgow. Graham, welcome.
Yes. Thank you. It's very nice to speak to you, Mr. Mogg.
Well, it's a pleasure to hear you. Thank you.
I just want to ask you a couple of quick questions. I want to ask you about democracy, and when you look at Scotland, when they're overwhelming majority to stay on the referendum, and then cast back to the 2014 result, where we were told that the only way that Scotland could be, part of Europe was to stay with United Kingdom, and then 2 years later we're being pulled, yanked out against our will. Is MD listening to Scotland? Do you know what can you say to the Scottish people? Because I know there's the Tory vote is decimated in Scotland. The Labour vote is decimated. So, I just want to know, if you support Brexit, no deal means break up the United Kingdom, and I'm quite happy for that. So if you can get behind a no deal...
I don't think it does mean that. I think
it does. It definitely does. At this point, no... There's not one microphone that comes to Scotland when it comes to news reports, when it comes to like Sky News, BBC.
But all the microphones are on former leaders of the Scottish National Party at the moment, aren't they? That's what they're interested in nowadays. But I better not get. I've got a feeling that might be sub judice, so I should be careful what I say about Mr. Salmond.
Bad for you.
But thank you. No, I think that Scotland voted to remain in the United Kingdom, and then the United Kingdom voted to leave. You're absolutely right that the status of Scotland within the European Union was part of the discussion during the referendum. But people vote in a referendum on all the arguments, not just on one. So I think that's why it's perfectly legitimate for the whole United Kingdom to leave, because we are still one country, which I think is to all our advantage. And I'm very grateful that the Scots voted to remain in the United Kingdom, and I think as an Englishman we should be delighted that Scotland is part of our country and that we are one country stronger together. So thank you very much for calling and expressing your view, and I hope you'll call again. I'm now going to go to Simon in Norwich. Simon.
Hello, Jacob. It's nice to speak to you.
Well, thank you for calling.
I just want to say I voted to leave. I didn't vote for any deals. I just want out, and that's the bottom line. I think all these experts that come on and say that there's going to be this or it's going to be that, realistically, it's far too complicated for anyone to say for sure what's going to happen. But this country used to be an empire at one time, and I don't know why everyone thinks that we're so pathetic now that we're not going to be able to manage to get through this and, you know, move on and make something of the country again. It just seems phenomenal that we've all turned into these snowflakes who, you know, just think, oh, it's all doom and gloom, and we've got to have this special deal.
Well, it has to be said, not the callers to LBC this evening. We seem to be entirely stout-hearted Britons and no real snowflakes today. Are you worried, you upset that Philip Hammond might resign if he doesn't get his own way, or you're not too bothered?
Care. It's up to him. I mean, it's his funeral, it's his job, isn't it? At the end of the day, it makes no difference to me as long as we're out. You know, that's the only thing. I took my children with me when this vote came. Because I thought to myself, this is going to be the biggest vote and the biggest thing for them. So I took them along. They were 5 and 9 at the time, and they went through the whole process so they could see what it was. And it was important to show them that. But now I have to explain to them that maybe, even though we've voted, it's not going to happen because, you know, there's other people who have got different ideas, and the vote wasn't counted. And if that's the case, what kind of example does that set to my children?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, I think what you say is so important, but if there are any supporters of Philip Hammond out there who again lose sleep over his resignation, I do hope that they might consider calling in the last quarter of an hour of this programme. We've had an excellent text from Dave as a Brexit voter, and he's not in favour of no deal. He doesn't think it's constructive. He says the spirit of the day must be one of compromise. May's deal delivers a compromise in the middle, one that is not perfect, but is a lot better than where we're heading for. I'm not sure I agree, but I think it's an interesting comment to be making. I wonder if we can go quickly to Paul in Burnley. You've got about 10 seconds before we go to the news to give your view.
Hammond doesn't want a no deal, and neither does Yvette Cooper. But Yvette Cooper should realise that there are 5 million Labour voters who also voted leave, and they're less concerned about having no deal taken off the table than a no future Remain left on it.
Thank you very much. That's a brilliant point, and we've delayed the news for you because it was such an important point for you to make. Thank you very much. It is 6:45, and it's time for the news headlines with Lisa Adiz. Welcome back. We're discussing whether we should be listening to all these dire warnings, or we should just put them down to outright scaremongering. If you think we should listen, call 0345 60 60 973. If we should ignore these predictions, text 84850, or if you don't mind at all, tweet at LBC. And so far we've had more stout-hearted Britons who are not worried, aren't hiding under the bedclothes, aren't fretting away and getting emergency supplies in, and very few snowflakes. But we've got a quarter of an hour, 10 minutes left. So who are we going to go to next? Nazir in Bank, what are your thoughts?
Hi, Jacob. Thanks very much for taking my call. Good evening. I have a question that I wanted to ask you about the fund that Somerset Capital set up in Ireland very recently, I think earlier last year. You have, I think you're a non-executive director, I believe, is that correct?
I'm the chairman of Somerset Capital Management. I founded the business with partners in 2007.
That is correct. So if you believe in Britain so much, why would your own firm set up a fund in Ireland as compared to Britain?
Because we have funds in Singapore, in Australia, in Finland, in the United States, in Canada, and in the UK. We have funds to meet our clients, who are an international client base, investing in emerging markets around the world. So there's the advert for Somerset Capital Management, which I think is not allowed by the Financial Conduct Authority. So I'd better move on to Frankie in Exeter. Frankie, what would you like to say? Hello.
I'm a young pro-Brexit person, and I think one of the things people are worrying about the most is these stories of things being stockpiled by the government, right? But Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, is a Remainer, and I'm thinking maybe he's behind this, and this is part of, perhaps, for want of a better word, a plot to almost undermine Brexit and make us unsure about it, and to effectively ensure we don't leave the EU properly.
Well, I think that's a strong argument that some of the Project Fear items coming from the government do seem to have been deliberately designed to push people towards supporting the Prime Minister's deal, or generally trying to move away from a clean Brexit. And it became clear yesterday that the warning from Airbus, for example, was something that the government itself encouraged. And that, I agree with you, I think that's pretty poor behaviour, that the government shouldn't be trying to frighten people.
Absolutely. And also the stories about, say, Dyson moving their HQ to Singapore. I mean, that's 2 employees moving, and they've done that because Singapore has lower corporation tax.
Well, and that's a very important point. I think we need to be globally competitive with Singapore, and that the pro-Europeans are very backward-looking. They're actually the old-fashioned ones who think the world is about competing with the EU, and that's old hat. The EU economic model has failed. Little Europeans. Yeah, no, you're quite right. So you're not scared? You're not worried if Philip Hammond resigns in a fit of pique?
Not at all. I mean, the People's Vote rabble, who seem to be fighting with each other anyway, these anti-Brexit protesters, they claim to speak for me as a young person, and they don't. And I was campaigning for a hard Brexit in Exeter with Leave Means Leave recently, and a small mob of teenagers came over and started harassing us at the stall. I mean, we had LGBT people there, and this young Egyptian Muslim subjected us to some pretty horrible homophobic abuse. So, if those are the sort of young people who want to remain, we should ignore them. And I think some of the young pro-Leave voters are actually quite well informed, as opposed to what you'll hear in the media.
Well, I think that's really important, and I think young people, middle-aged and old people, are all of varying views, and that it's what the Queen says, that we should speak well of each other and respect different points of view. There is no place for abuse in political discourse, certainly not abuse of the kind you refer to. Anyway, thank you for calling and giving some balance by reminding us that there are younger voters who are staunchly in favour of Brexit. And I'm going to ask Alex in Redditch. Alex, what are your thoughts this evening?
Hi, Jacob. Just a few points, really. I think we need to kind of move away from saying that the government the government's full of Remainers or the government's anti-Brexit, because I mean, we've seen already that Theresa May is adamant that no deal is not on the table. She's not going to. She's refusing to take no deal off the table, and she's adamant that there will not be a second referendum. For the record, I am a Remainer. I'm a staunch Remainer. I think we are much better off in the EU. I think we had an incredibly strong position. I think we'll never get that back ever, because it was a one-time deal. I think we will be poorer for it. I think we need to look at things like Dyson moving to Singapore and be realistic. For James Dyson to be really pro-Brexit on the one hand and then move to Singapore because they've got a free trade agreement with the EU, and of course they'll no longer pay any tax through HM Revenue and Customs. Because
hold on, that's not right though, is it? Because you do still pay tax in the UK. You pay corporation tax on where your profits are derived, and just moving your headquarters doesn't move your tax. There will be transfer payments between the two companies.
But we already know that you can structure your company in such a way that you can pay ridiculously low amounts of corporation tax.
Yeah, but the difference between corporation tax in Singapore and the UK is nowadays tiny, because we've cut corporation tax so much. It's 1 or 2%. It's not a great advantage in corporation tax terms between the two. It's that the Asian markets are growing so much faster than the European market. That's the reason for moving there.
And of course, he knows he's got a guaranteed free trade agreement with the EU, which at the moment we don't know.
That's trivial, because it's looking at the growth. 90% of growth is expected to come from outside the European Union in world trade. It's not that he gets the benefit of that. It's that he gets the benefit of growth in the Asian markets. Sorry, you cut out briefly.
Sorry, it's conjecture at that point. And that aside, because there's multiple examples of prominent businesses moving out of the UK or planning to move out of the UK, and they've all cited Brexit as a real concern. So it's not a case that I'm coming on to espouse all the negativities around Brexit, because to me it's a done deal.
But we remain. Sorry, it's a done deal. So you're now relaxed about it happening. You wish it weren't, but you're accepting it. Is that your position?
Well, unfortunately, it's going to happen, and I think we all need to try and make the best of it, but I will make another point if I've got time and say that 2 out of the 3 devolved governments, Northern Ireland and Scotland, both voted overwhelmingly to remain. The backstop is, we can't do anything about it, as much as Theresa May and the government say, oh, we're going to renegotiate the backstop. We can't, because it's an EU requirement.
Okay.
And the backstop.
I want to get in one more caller quickly, so thank you so much for your call. You're not a snowflake, you're a thoughtful voter. Thank you very much. And now Charlotte in the Forest of Dean, in Mark Harper's constituency. Charlotte.
Good evening, Mr. Rees. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for calling.
I just wanted to say that I think because the scaremongering has been ramped up really for the past 9 to 12 months, people are now becoming, I think, more aware of the reek of desperation for the government and those who are pro-Remain to actually stay. And sometimes it's almost laughable to see the kind of rubbish that they trot out if we don't get a no-deal Brexit. In fact, what it's done is tipped everything over so that now there's a very strong no-deal Brexit feeling out there amongst, people like myself who want to leave. So I think they're doing the no-deal Brexit a really good favour.
So what you're saying is that because people don't really trust their politicians and think they've been talking a lot of nonsense and trying to bully us into taking their view, that actually they've become more and more relaxed about no deal and think we'll be fine.
Yeah, I think a lot of people now are coming round to the idea that a no-deal Brexit would be a far more acceptable solution because the lies and the absolute garbage that the Remain camp have been coming out with and the fear-mongering and the scepticism, I think people are suddenly thinking, well, maybe a no-deal Brexit is the best thing for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very incisive, and this evening we've had brilliant calls, almost entirely from stout-hearted Britons, very few snowflakes. We're going over, following my brand new show, to Nick Abbott at 10 o'clock, but next it's Andrew Pearce discussing the Queen.
Thank you very much.